For 700 years, a single word has defined the downfall of the Knights Templar, Baphomet. Most think it's a demon, but the truth is, it's a code. And cracking it exposes one of history's greatest conspiracies. That conspiracy was designed to turn heroes into monsters. It is about how power creates its own gods and its own demons. To understand the demon, you must first understand the saint. The Knights Templar were born from the fire and blood of the First Crusade. Their sacred duty was to protect pilgrims on the treacherous roads to Jerusalem. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. You would see them on the battlefield, a force of nature in their white mantles emblazoned with a red cross, charging into impossible odds because they believed death in battle was a direct path to heaven. They were incorruptible, they were invincible, and they became rich, incredibly rich. Over 200 years, kings, queens, and nobles showered them with land, castles, and gold. They became the world's first multinational corporation, an international banking system that held the crowns of Europe in its debt. They were more than soldiers. They had become a state within a state, accountable only to the Pope himself. And that was their fatal error, because one of their greatest debtors was Philip IV of France, a king whose ambition was matched only by his ruthlessness and whose treasury was empty. He looked at the Templars, and he did not see holy warriors. He saw a solution to all of his problems. He saw a bank waiting to be broken. But you cannot simply arrest God's bankers. You cannot execute heroes of the faith for the crime of being your creditor. No, you need a weapon powerful enough to turn a hero into a monster overnight. You need an accusation so vile it poisons the very soul of their reputation. You need heresy. Imagine you are one of those knights. You have fought and bled for your faith in the unforgiving Son of the Holy Land. Now you are in a stone cell, deep beneath Paris. The air is foul, the darkness absolute. The only light comes when the inquisitors enter. They do not ask you about finance or politics. They ask you about a head, a demon. They ask you about Baphomet. When you deny it, the pain begins. Your joints are pulled from their sockets on the rack. Your feet are held over burning coals. Days turn into weeks. Your body is broken. Your mind is a fortress under siege. And they keep whispering the name, Baphomet, Baphomet. Eventually, men will confess to anything to make the pain stop. The confessions, when they came, were a tapestry of horror. Night after night, their voices hoarse with agony, admitted to the unthinkable. They confessed to trampling and spitting on the crucifix during their secret initiation ceremonies. They confessed to being taught that Christ was a false prophet, and they confessed to venerating an idol, a monstrous head that spoke to them and gave them riches. The pact was broken. The holiest of knights were now servants of the devil. But look closer at the evidence, at the words spoken under duress. The descriptions of Baphomet are a chaotic mess. To one knight it was a gilded wooden head with a silver beard. To another it had 3 faces. A third claimed it was the skull of a long-dead master, while others spoke of a demonic black cat. There was no consistency. There was no single idol. How could they all be worshipping the same entity, yet describe it so differently? This is our first clue. It suggests that the inquisitors were not uncovering a pre-existing cult. They were feeding their prisoners a legend, planting a seed of terror, and asking them to describe the monster that grew from it in the darkness of their own minds. The conflicting stories weren't a sign of a complex theology. They were the echoes of a well-orchestrated lie. So where did the name come from? If King Philip's inquisitors invented the cult, did they also invent the demon? No. The greatest lies are not built from nothing. They are built upon a twisted shard of truth. And the truth the Templars carried was far more dangerous to the old world than any demon. For 2 centuries, the Templars had lived at the crossroads of civilization. While Europe slumbered in its dogmatic certainty, they were in the Near East, interacting with the great minds of Islamic and Jewish mysticism. They were warriors, yes, but they were also diplomats and scholars. They encountered Sufi philosophers, Gnostic sects that had survived since the age of Christ, and the keepers of knowledge from Alexandria and Babylon. They were exposed to a wider, more complex, more esoteric vision of the divine than anyone in Paris or Rome could possibly imagine. They learned that the world was not as simple as good versus evil, Christian versus infidel. They touched a syncretic faith, a blending of ideas, and they brought that dangerous knowledge home with them. This is the turn. This is where we pull back the veil. The conspiracy was not a Templar conspiracy against God. It was a conspiracy of the old world against a new and dangerous idea. Let us return to that name, Baphomet. For centuries, scholars have debated its origin. Some say it was a simple French corruption of the name Mahomet or Muhammad, a crude attempt to paint the Templars as secret Muslims. Plausible, but too simple. Others point to Gnostic codes, where Baphomet might mean Baphometus, the baptism of wisdom, referring to a secret initiation into a higher truth. But the most compelling theory goes deeper. It deciphers the name not through Greek or French, but through the language the Templars would have encountered every day in the East, Arabic. When subjected to a specific cipher known to the educated men of the era, the Atbash cipher, the name Baphomet transforms perfectly into the Greek word Sophia, wisdom. They weren't being accused of worshipping a demon. They were being accused of worshipping wisdom itself, a feminine Gnostic concept of the divine that stood in stark opposition to the rigid patriarchal Church of Rome. But there is an even more direct path. In Arabic, the phrase Abu fi Hamat means father of understanding. Say it aloud, Abu fi Hamat. Hear how it slips, how it could be misheard by a French tongue, twisted by a suspicious ear into Baphomet. The idol was never a head of wood and silver. It was a concept. The father of understanding was the secret knowledge they had acquired, that God could be approached through many paths, through mysticism and philosophy, as well as through scripture. This was their true heresy, not demon worship, but the belief that their understanding of God was more sophisticated, more direct than that of the king and even the Pope. The spitting on the cross, the denial of Christ, even this can be seen through a new lens. Some scholars suggest it was part of a brutal psychological test for new recruits, teaching them what it might be like to be captured by Saracens and forced to deny their faith. They were being trained to lie with their lips while holding the cross in their hearts. A dangerous drill, but one designed to forge unbreakable soldiers, not heretics. King Philip didn't need any of this to be true. He just needed it to be believable. He took their secret symbols, their esoteric knowledge learned from the enemy, and he forged them into a demonic caricature. The bearded head was no longer the father of understanding, but a horned goat, a devil. Their secret wisdom became black magic. Their silence and discipline became proof of a hidden conspiracy. He took their truth and made it a weapon against them. The Knights Templar were not destroyed by a demon. They were destroyed by a word. They were the victims of a propaganda campaign so successful that the shadow of Baphomet still lingers 700 years later. Their story is a timeless, brutal lesson. It teaches us that the most terrifying monster is not the one with horns and claws, but the lie that we are told about those we do not understand. It is the fear of knowledge, the fear of the other, twisted and given a name. The Templars fell because they saw a bigger world than their king could tolerate. Their true crime was not heresy. It was evolution, and in the great grinding gears of history, anything that evolves too fast is often mistaken for a monster.